Hi, okay, so I'm going to try and do a tutorial on how to make a mask that uses filti fabric on the inside, which is like a filter fabric, kind of similar to the N95 masks, and then it has cotton fabric on the outside, and it also has a nose guard in place so that you can bend that to go around the nose while the wearer is wearing it. So the first step is going to be to gather your materials, your tools. You're going to need 2 cotton trapezoids, 100% cotton, Quilter's cotton is best. You're going to need 2 pieces of filti. This is actually 4, but I've already sewn them all together. So you really just need 2 pieces of filti cut into the exact same measurements as your cotton fabric, and you're going to need 2 strips of twill, and that should be cut about 17 inches long, and 1 piece of twill cut about 4 inches long. Okay. And if you need a template, we can get a template to you as well, but basic measurements for the template are 4 inches along the top, and then the bottom is about 9 inches. So you'll also need basic equipment like scissors, probably you can use your finger or a pencil to push out the corners. You might want a ruler and, or a rotor cutter. So the first thing that you're going to want to do when you begin sewing is you're going to want to sew together your filti fabric. There's 2 sides of the fabric. One of them is more soft and cottony and kind of just feels a little bit softer. The other side feels a little bit more, I don't know how to explain it other than maybe just plasticky or rougher. It's just not as soft as the other side. And you can definitely feel a difference when you touch them. So you're going to sew right sides together for that, and you're going to sew along this diagonal, the 4-inch side, and then this diagonal. You're going to leave the 9-inch side completely unsewn so you can open it up and it looks sort of like a little boat, like a little ship would be sailing by. The next step is that you're going to sew on the nose piece. This is the piece that we're going to slide the metal into when it is assembled. So we won't sew that on we won't put that on until at one of the last steps. So we're going to start by sewing a rectangle around, but we're not going to complete the rectangle, so we leave one side open to be able to slide that metal piece into. So just pick a side. I usually pick the nicer side, the more square side, and then leave that side open. You can sew that side to itself to keep it from fraying, but I think as much as you're sewing this down, it's not going to be a very big deal if you don't do that. I've done it both ways and it seems to work fine. So when you align this, you're going to want to make sure that it is in the middle of the fabric. And what I use to help guide that is, since this is a 4-inch piece of strip and this is a 4-inch side of the trapezoid, I just kind of align this end with this side and this, and I really just use my eyes and the eyeball. Also, I'm going to make sure it's about a twill's length away from the edge of the fabric. So it's like basically double itself over. So before I sew that down. Make sure to backstitch at the beginning of this to lock in your stitches so they don't unravel as well. Okay, so now I'm going to take my 2 long pieces of twill and I am going to lay them on the top fabric, which is the one that I've sewn my nose piece on. And I'm going to line them up so that they are about the same distance from the bottom of the fabric as the nose piece is. So I want to have both of those pieces about the same distance away. from the end of the fabric. And then I'm going to take my bottom piece of fabric and I'm going to turn it right side together and lay that carefully on top. And I'm going to meet up my ends. You can pin your fabric if you if that helps you. You could pin your fabric and you can pin down the ribbon. You're going to be especially careful not to sew over the ribbon at any other place in the fabric than the two places that you want. And when you get to these places, you may want to backstitch over a couple times just to really secure that twill in, because that's going to be taking a lot of the tension. Now when I open it up, I can see the inside of the fabric. It has my my twill. I'm going to keep my twill ribbons inside of that fabric at this time. So I'm going to keep the twill inside for now and open it up so it kind of looks again like a little boat floating down. And now I'm going to take my filti fabric and I'm going to turn it inside out. And I'm just going to use my fingers to push the corners at the 4-inch side, the bottom part of the trapezoid out. So now I have the right side out, and I'm going to take that and insert it into my cotton fabric. And this part I am going to line up the outer edges all the way around the top. And this part's kind of important. You really want to have these sides matched up together. So I'm going to match together these sides and also this side over here. And then I like to choose the bottom side of the fabric, not the side that has the rectangle where the nose piece is, but the other side that doesn't have anything. I just like to start and finish my fabric on the back or the bottom part as a habit. So I am going to make sure my sides are lined up, and I'm going to begin about in the middle because I'm going to be leaving a gap there for me to flip my fabric. It's about a 2 to 3 inch gap to flip your fabric. You're going to want to make sure to backstitch this part for sure. And again, being very cautious not to sew over your twill in any place. If it gets too close, you could just kind of tuck it back down away from the top. So around, making sure that I'm matching up my sides. You can pin this if you choose to. I don't love pins personally, so I tend to not use them, but they really help, especially they can help keep your fabric in line, especially at those corners and those edges where you don't really want to skip over on accident. Alright, so I'm coming around to the end where I have sewn together my fabric, and I'm going to stop about 2 or 3 inches from the end here and make sure to backstitch. Now I'm going to flip this fabric inside out. So I have my fabric and I've left this gap right here where I'm going to use that to flip it. So when I flip it, this is kind of a nice thing about having the ribbon on the inside is you can pull the ribbons and it will help pull your ribbon, your fabric inside out much easier. So if you sew those in correctly, that's good. And now I'm going to take my finger, and over by the ribbons there's that corner where they came together, and I'm going to use my finger to kind of just poke out that corner. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need to use scissors or anything sharp. Just use your finger to kind of point them out. And now I'm going to turn it so it would look like when it's finished. And again, kind of just using my fingers to push the corners down at the bottom of the fabric, so it looks like it's gonna look. And now I'm gonna go up to the top and sort of straighten the top out, pushing in the inside fabric and straightening the top. And where I've left that gap, this is the gap that I flipped it through, I'm going to just kind of use my fingers and turn that fabric inside so it sort of matches what the rest of the fabric looks like as I've sewn it around. And I am going to close this seam. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm actually going to sew around the entire outside of the top part of the trapezoid. So if this was the 9-inch side, it'll be about 18 inches of sewing that I'm doing going around the outside. I'm going to sew as close to the edge as I can, just to try and keep this part to catch this part in, and I want it to look uniform going around. So I'm going to be sewing pretty close to the edge the whole way around this part. And I'm going to start sewing at this part to make sure that I don't make a mistake and not grab it on the way back. So there we go, carefully sewing around and making sure to close this seam. I am definitely going to backstitch this. This is actually finishing off our product, our mask, and I want to make sure it looks nice. All of the points, and I should only have 2 turn points on this, and that is at the ends. And little trim threads as a final part of this mask. Backstitching to close in that seam. And the final part of making this mask before we can put in the nose guard is and trim our seams, or trim our strings I should say, is we are going to sew just a little bit here. It doesn't have to be the whole length of it, but what it's going to do is keep the mask from like flipping around like this or breathing in and out like this when the person's wearing it. So just to sew that down, we're just going to put a little bit of a seam along here. It's less important what it looks like on the inside. The thread matches the inside really well, but I'm going to try and stitch in the ditch. So I'm going to try and open my seam up and stitch along my inner seam and hopefully hide my thread as much as possible. Again, not that important what it looks like on the inside, more important that we kind of hide that thread on the outside. So we're just tacking down what we've already done. Okay, and then the final thing that I'm going to go through and do is trim off any loose threads. I'll flip it inside out and grab those threads as well. And I will put a knot in the bottom of these twill because although I can sew them down, this is a far faster and easier way of doing it and works just as well for the wearer. And then the last thing there is to do is to insert the nose guard into the pocket that we made here, and our mask is done.